greetings everyone. Actually, I'm streaming to more than just LinkedIn today. So if you're kind of on Facebook as well as YouTube, you'll be able to see me. As always, I come on slightly before the session starts, just to kind of give the algorithms a chance to find me. So I'm going to give a couple of seconds for someone kind to say that they can see me on screen. Hi everyone, I am of course Kolarili Shunaike. I'm going to wait and see when the chats start coming in. Jonathan says you can see me, excellent, and can you hear me as well? I want to make sure. There was a time I clicked the wrong setting and I went off for like 20 seconds or so in my last webinar. But I can see some names starting to come in, which is great. There's again another LinkedIn user, which really frustrates me. I can never tell who that is. So do put your name as well so that I can give you a shout out. I'll give it kind of another few seconds just for people to come on, as it's just coming up to 1 o'clock now. So LinkedIn user says, yes, can see you and hear you. Thank you very much. Excellent. Okay, we've got a few more people coming in. Muiwa, Eva, great. Okay, cool. So I'm going to assume that everyone can see me. Abuchi as well. Hey, Abuchi, nice to see you as well. Excellent. Great. Okay, cool. So I'm going to assume everyone can see me. As I say, I'm streaming to a few more platforms today. So if you're on Facebook and all those other places, feel free to say hi, drop a comment in on the chat. All right, so as I've been saying and as I've been doing for these lunchtime sessions, it's really designed to give you some snippets of help on distinct communication skills topics. Of course, we can't cover everything whilst I'm here, so I have kind of separate coaching I do. I'll put the links at the end, so if you want to take your communication skills to the next level, you can reach out to me. LinkedIn users, Maggie. Okay, great. Thank you, Maggie. Thanks for saying that, and welcome to everyone else. Do put a link in the chat or message in the chat so I know you're there. So today we are going to be focusing on, let's see, we're going to be focusing on PowerPoint. And PowerPoint in particular, what I say are some kind of really fundamental mistakes that a lot of people make with their PowerPoint presentations that will make your your presentations look amateur. Actually, I should say amateurish, but I just didn't like it when I wrote that in the title. So it will make your presentations look amateur. And they're really simple things that can be easily and quickly changed or eliminated. But if you don't know them, you might be kind of continuing to commit those mistakes. And they're going to really undermine the professionalism with which you are presenting. So I want to go through them today and kind of just give you a few tips on how to avoid those presentation mistakes. Okay, so you guys, I think, can see my screen because I can see myself. So let's go through it. Now, the first thing is, I understand why everybody uses PowerPoint or Keynote or other slide presentation software. I understand it, right? PowerPoint was invented, I think, or launched about 1987, right? And since then, there have been billions of PowerPoint presentations given. So it really has become quite ubiquitous in especially the business world and kind of world of work to use a PowerPoint presentation. And it does make sense, right? Because there are benefits to using it. For instance, there's been research that's been done that has shown that actually 60% of us are visual learners. 60% of us are visual learners, which means the majority of people actually get a lot of information, not just through hearing it or reading it, but actually seeing it. And kind of it enters and penetrates their consciousness in that way. So it really does make sense to use a visual aid slide presentation like PowerPoint to build on your message. The difficulty is that because we know that, it just has come to be the go-to system for presentations. And you'll think about it. If I said to you, if you were told at work or in your careers, whatever, hey, you've got to give a presentation tomorrow, I will bet you a whole load of people, the first thing they'll do is go to start preparing their slides. It's like, I've got a presentation to give, got to do my slides. And that just becomes the way. And there's kind of a reason for that. It's just become expected. It kind of reminds me of the response that George Mallory, who was the first person to climb Mount Everest, gave when he was asked, so why did you climb Mount Everest? And his response was just, because it's there, right? And that has kind of become the way with presentations, is that we think presentation, we think PowerPoint or Keynote or whatever, Prezi, all these different softwares now, just because it's there. And the first thing I want to say, and actually the mistake that I think people make, is actually to assume that to give a presentation, you have to use slides or you have to use PowerPoint. You don't, all right? Think about some of the greatest speeches and presentations that have ever been given, right? Like, you didn't see Martin Luther King give his I Have a Dream speech with a slide presentation with loads of bullet points on it, right? You just don't see that, because PowerPoint presentations are not meant to be about the slides. So the first mistake that actually a lot of people make, and I really want to encourage you to think in different terms, is to think that they have to use PowerPoint if they are giving a presentation. You don't. The biggest and most important factor in terms of how successful your presentation will be is the message that you share. So what I want you to think about is this. You are the presentation. It's not your slides. It's not how well they look, how well designed they are. It's you. It's what you say. It's how you deliver it. It's how you connect with your audience. It's how much value you put into what you are going to share with the people you're presenting to. So that's my first tip for avoiding the mistake of relying too heavily on PowerPoint. Because you see, what happens when you start to rely too heavily on PowerPoint is that becomes your focus, as opposed to how am I going to change the minds of my audience, or how am I going to motivate them to do what I want them to do, or how am I going to inform them about the quarterly results, for this quarter in a way that enhances their understanding of the points I'm trying to make. So the first point I want you to think about is this. You are the presentation. It is you. It is you that people have come to see. If you were to total up all the people that are in your audience and add up all their hourly rates and kind of take an average, you think about how much money is at cost to sit and listen to you for however long you're doing your presentation. So you are the presentation, not your PowerPoint slide. So that is mistake number one that people make, and that's the one I want you to avoid. Again, put some comments in the chat if you can hear me, if that makes sense, and if that kind of helps with your own appropriate kind of approach to PowerPoint presentations. Okay, so let's go on to number two. And in number two, I want to actually use Mr. Bill Gates himself, who obviously didn't invent PowerPoint. Microsoft actually bought PowerPoint for about 15 million back in the day, but then it just became part of the Microsoft Office suite. And the truth is, Bill Gates himself was an appalling user of PowerPoint. He really made kind of mistake number two, which I'm going to outline, which is, in fact, let me take Bill Gates off. I don't want to be too unfair with him. Actually, he'll come back in a second. But the mistake number two is having far too much content. Having far too much content on your slides. Now, I bet you, many of you have seen slides like this, right? Slides in some way that pack in a whole load of information on the slide, right? Now, partly it may be that there's this myth that has gone round, especially in the corporate world, that your presentations really shouldn't have more than a certain number of slides, like no more than 30 slides, right? Now, the problem then is that people just think, oh, I have to pack loads of information into each slide. And so actually the slides become far too difficult to digest. The problem isn't the number of slides you have. The problem is what is on the slides in the first place. And this is a perfect example of far, far too much information on the slide. And what happens when you do that, right? And again, I will bet you have heard this, even if you haven't said it yourself. Maybe you said it yourself. How many times have you seen a PowerPoint presentation where the person giving the presentation turns away from the audience, turns to the screen and starts reading out what it says, right? Sometimes it's even, oh, you won't be able to read this at the back, so I'll tell you what it says. And then they'll read out each thing on the slide. Does that make sense, right? How does that help? But that is so common. If you're going to put stuff on a slide that you know people aren't going to be able to read, that is a problem. What's it doing there? And actually, there's kind of a deeper problem as well. So if you remember, my first tip was to remember that you are the presentation, not your slides, right? But you. When people end up reading the slides themselves, rather than focusing on what you say, they're going to disconnect from you. They're going to disconnect from you. And that's the problem with having too much on your slides. It gets cluttered and people take their attention from you and focus on what it says on the slides. So what you really need to do is to simplify your slides. So let's take this as an example, right? And let's look at a slightly better, now I'm not going to say completely better, but a slightly better way of approaching it. So take out a lot of this text in the graphs and just simplify it, right? Simplify it so that you can speak to each individual thing, not listing out in text form, but actually kind of setting it out and then speaking to the various issues, right? So here we can see efficiency. So you can see, look, if you go back to the old one, right? Look at that compared to more summarized information, talking about the efficiency and the share of sales and cost per unit and all of that, right? This is just a made up presentation, right? Does that make sense? But look, let's go further, right? Because yes, this is better, but there's still too much on it. And it means people are going to have to be looking at that and looking at you, looking at that and looking at you. So simplify it further and just focus each slide on one particular message, right? So this one is about efficiency and the computer product has gone up by 3.6%. I have no idea what that means, right? I just made this up. But the point is, this directs people's attention to taking that information in a visual form, but primarily concentrate on what you are going to be saying about that particular piece of information. And if you want to go even further, put a picture on it, because again, this humanizes the issue. So here it's like not just there's a 3.6% increase in productivity of a computer, but actually it's helping computers run faster, right? So you put a picture on it. So it just helps to humanize it, helps to bring the issue more to life for people. So that is the problem with having too much text. And actually, you remember I told you about Bill Gates being kind of one of the worst examples of too much information on text. Well, he's learned actually since he left PowerPoint, since he left Microsoft, and is now kind of just, I guess, an ambassador for good causes. So he gives some really great talks now. He does a lot of good TED Talks, for instance. One in particular where he didn't use PowerPoint at all. This is one where he was talking about the impact of malaria. And he actually had a mosquito in a jar that he said was malaria infected, although actually it wasn't. And he released it to the audience. Far more impact than having a whole load of slide presentation slides with graphs and charts and all of that. So mistake is having too much in your slides in the first place, which means the rule that you got to do, rule number 2, is keep it clean. Keep it clean. Don't over clutter, because it's just going to confuse your audience. It's going to make you kind of want to look at the screen instead of talking and connecting with your audience. And it's going to make everyone focus on that as opposed to focusing on you. Again, if that makes sense, please put a comment in the chat box so I can see that people are hearing me and that fits and makes sense. So I'm going to go on to number 3. So number 3, again, sorry, Bill Gates, number 3, but if you can see what the issue here is, number 3 is really about bullet points, the use of bullet points, the overuse of bullet points. And I don't know, what can I say about bullet points? Right, let's take Mr. Gates off, right? So I've been a bit harsh on him already. So let's put this on. So here's an example of the same issue, right? Quarter 3, and we're looking at efficiency of computer products and stuff like that. And bullet points are there. Now, the thing about bullet points is really that it encourages you to just list a whole load of information and text, right? So it's not that there's something inherently wrong with a bullet point. I use bullet points, for instance, when I write in particular. But in a visual form, it kind of just encourages you to write a lot instead of focusing on keeping the message short and simple and making you be the one to speak and give the information. So what I want to suggest, a very simple way to avoid the overuse of bullet points is this approach. And I'm going to show you a slide that I showed you earlier, right? So here. So what we've done here is instead of bullet points for each thing, then you list, if we go back and see efficiency of computer unit rose by 3.5% with a bullet point at the start. Instead, you put the main issue, i.e. as a title, efficiency. And then you add the context, it's up by 3.6%. And then you can expound on it in the words that you actually say, the delivery that you use. Again, it's just a simpler way and a visually stronger way of representing the information you want to give without the use of bullet points, which just encourages you to write a whole load, as we can see here, right? So look, sold 195,000 units, cost per unit. Do you see how you're just encouraged to write a lot of things? Whereas when you think about in titles, you think about what's most important, put that as a title, and then I'm going to put the information to support it, but in shortened form as well. So again, that's just another simple mistake that people make with their PowerPoints. Because again, I'm sure you've seen it, loads and loads of bullet points, and you know end up reading it out and everyone's reading it, as opposed to something that is focused, short, and sharp. So that's the mistake number 3, which means my recommendation for number 3 is to use titles and not bullet points. Use titles and not bullet points. It's going to help you keep it short and keep it focused. Lin Min Chow says, keeping it clean, love this. Definitely helps viewers focus on the main idea that you're trying to convey. Absolutely, Li Min, that is exactly the point. You really want to remember that it's you who is the presentation. It is not your bullet points. It's not your slides. You're the one that is there to convince, to persuade, to motivate, to change people's minds by the value of the information that you share. Especially if you put it a different way, right? If they can get the value that they need to get from reading what you have to put on the slides, to just send it to them by email and don't waste everybody's time by making them turn up for your presentation, right? You need to be giving far more from the value of your presence than can be shown in the content of the slides themselves. And bullet points is one of the things that just encourages you to write far too much compared to using titles and then a summary of the point you want to make. So that is point number 3. Okay, so let's go on. So now brace yourself for this one. Here we go there. Now, if you're anything like me, actually, even when I reviews my slides, just the moment when that slide came on, it probably kind of made you do a jolt back a bit because it kind of the white really affected your eyes slightly. And this is, again, another simple mistake, just has a really good impact on your audience when you correct it. And that's because white backgrounds hurt your eyes, and they actually also take your focus away from you and onto the thing that is kind of providing the most contrast, the most kind of visual contrast in front of you. And this is obviously especially the case when you're doing physical presentations rather than Zoom on this one, where at the moment you can only see whatever I choose to put on screen. But if you're delivering your presentation, especially physically, but even when it's just online like this, because people are looking at their computer screens, white backgrounds hurt, right? Now, I understand why it is we generally use white backgrounds, and that's because that's how we write, right? If I open a Word document, it's going to be a white background with black text, or Google Docs, or even emails. So we are used to writing in kind of that approach. And so the natural instinct, and some of the templates on Microsoft and all of that actually kind of encourage you to do this, is to put everything on a white or very light background and then have the text in dark. Here's the thing, that hurts people's eyes, even if subconsciously they don't realize it consciously, they will realize it subconsciously. So just flip it, right? Instead of a white background with dark text, have a dark background with white text or light text. And you'll find that people's eyes just relax a bit. In fact, that probably happened with you. So if I go back, look, go back to that white background, go down to this softer, darker background, just makes it easier to look at the screen when you have to look at it, right? Still don't pack too much into it. Still don't put far too much text and bullets and graphs and all of that. But whatever you have, keep the background just dark, keep it low key, so that you remain the main focus in people's eyes as opposed to your slides. And it's also easy to view. Okay, so I mean, that makes sense. That is, what are we, number 4. Okay, so let's go on to number 5. Then I'll do kind of a quick review just of the 5 main mistakes and how to avoid them that I've covered. So number 5, had a little bit of fun with this. So here we go. So number 4 is go dark, right? So I meant to say that's the principle, that's the tip, go dark. So number 5, right? Let's go back to our quarter 3 results. And here, how many of you have seen stuff like this? See, that comes in jumping along there. Oh yes, we've got some kind of iris flashing there. Oh, a bit of reverse stuff there. Spinning over there. What did I do in the next one? Oh yeah, flames, fireworks, and then, oh yes, the anvil dropping the hammer over the picture. How many of you guys have seen stuff like that, right? It's animations and transitions, and Microsoft and Keynote and Prezi and all of these ones really, really kind of go into this, right? Go into this and offer these options. And it is so tempting to play around with them and kind of have things swooping in and flying in. I've seen it with kind of sound effects as well, and a whoosh sound as text flies in and a graph explodes, whatever, right? It's a lot of fun to play with toys. But here's the thing. If you find yourself doing that, just remember that it means that you are putting your focus on your slides and not your message, right? You're putting your focus on your slides and not your message. And you really want to be focused on the message itself and dispense with all the trickery, right? And all the flying in and the exploding and the fireworks and all the kind of stuff that you can do and spend a lot of time doing. But what it does is it just signals that that is where your focus has been, as opposed to the content of your message. And remember, as I said at the beginning, you don't even have to use slides at all. They really can become a crutch where you just do too much reliance on them instead of how you're going to change people's minds, or how you're going to motivate the action, or how you're going to inform them with such value that they know something new that they didn't know before. So my kind of tip number 5 related to mistake number 5 is no tricks, right? Just put the information on the slides that is going to help to enhance the message that you already want to share. Let your message do the work. Let the slides enhance that message. You don't need all the trickery to go with it. I know it's a lot of fun. In fact, I had a lot of fun just putting that stuff together, but it really has no value in terms of the message and the impact that you want to have with your presentations. Let me have a look at some of the comments. So we've got LinkedIn user, maybe I assume that's Maggie again. Yes, I have to change my background in Word to blue. Yeah, so Word is kind of a different, that's a different issue, isn't it? I mean, Word is written software for creating documents. I can understand why that's done in white, although some people actually have a dark background as it's easier to read. So and also obviously when you're printing Word document out, then you really do need to have it in kind of dark background, white background and dark text. So LinkedIn user said black, not so great for you. Okay, yeah, so you don't have to use black. I mean, I actually use a lot of blue backgrounds on my slide presentations. Today I have a kind of a gradient gray thing. I play around with it, but the main thing is I always avoid having a white background. And then I guess this is Maggie again, says, I use the animation tool to introduce words or phrases to a slide when I teach in primary school. Yeah, so primary school may be slightly different because I know sometimes you have to kind of do things to kind of capture the attention of young children. But so it's not so much that I have a specific problem with animations. I kind of do, but it's not that. It's that it then becomes a greater focus, i.e. how do my slides look and how will they visually kind of be fun, as opposed to what is the message and what's the content. Now, I'm assuming, I think that was Maggie, that as a primary school teacher, you've already kind of put in a whole load of work into the content anyway. So if you've done that work and you've really thought about how can I do it in a way that will bring the content alive for my audience, in this case, your primary school children, then you can start to think about, okay, well, if an animation helps to keep their interest for that moment, then yeah, maybe I'll use it. But just beware of that. My recommendation is always think about, is there a way in which I can bring the content alive because of the value of the content, the way in which I get them to think about it, as opposed to the trickery that I use with my slides, right? In particular, as much as I said that people are visual learners, if you remember at the beginning of the presentation, I said people are 60% visual learners. As much as that is true, in fact, there is also far greater learning that can come from action, so kinesthetic learning or kinesthetic action in your presentation. So if you make your presentations interactive, get the audience doing stuff, they will actually assimilate far more. I think there's the phrases, I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. That's the philosophy. So kinesthetic learning is actually even more effective than just visual learning. But certainly when you're doing slide presentations, you want to focus on the value of what you're going to say and use your slides to enhance it rather than on the slides themselves. Let's have a look. Yes, I agree with for training adults, definitely needs to be simple. Yes, definitely needs to be simple. But as I say, even with young children as well, because I actually do presentations and kind of training for younger children, not quite primary school, though I've done that in my kids' school before. And what I found actually is that kinesthetic, that's getting them doing stuff, is 10 times more impactful than reading stuff, than hearing stuff, even the visual stuff as well. Of course, I know you probably have to use some of that in your primary school. So yeah, thank you for that question, Maggie. And yes, those are some of the tips, 5 tips, as I said, for presentations, right? So if we go back, tip number 1 was, where are we? Yes, you are the presentation, not your slides. So don't rely on your slides to do the work for you. You do the work, then use your slides as an enhancement. Tip number 2, keep it clean. Don't over clutter your presentations with lots and lots of texts and charts and graphs. Keep it clean, 1 message per slide. You can have as many slides as you want. If there's a sense of momentum and it's not cluttered, people will be fine with it. Tip number 3, of course, is use titles rather than bullet points. Have the big title for what the core of the information is, and then kind of the supplementary detail next to that title. Tip number 4 is use dark backgrounds, not white, please. And tip number 5 is just avoid all of this stuff, right? A lot of fun, but really it just wastes you and everybody else's time. So tip number 5 is dispense with the tricks. A couple more comments on here. Victoria says, great tip, didn't realize the white background was doing to people's eyes. Yes, it really, really does hurt. They will never say it. They won't articulate it. They won't even realize it. But you switch to a dark background and you will just know that people are more relaxed in taking in your information. Let's have a look. I think that was it. Black Knots are great for me. I use the animation tool. I agree, and amen. Okay, cool. So those are some of the comments. Good, excellent. Thank you guys so much. As always, I'm kind of keeping these lunchtime ones short and sharp. just half an hour whilst you're eating your sandwiches, so that you can take in some useful information that will help you with your day and with your careers. As always, if you want to reach out more to me, do look for my link. I've put it with the link to this. If you're on LinkedIn, you'll see the link already. If you're on other platforms, I've put the link in there. Go to greatspeech.co-get started. Or get-started. I have a free kind of consultation. We'll talk about your communication skills, what your challenges are, what your goals are, and how I can help. But otherwise, thank you guys for joining me. As always, it's been fun. We are now bang on 1:30, which means I'm getting really good at timing this. Thank you guys for joining me. If you came late, I think this replay will be available fairly soon as well, so look out for that. And we can see some thanks coming in, which is great. Thank you, guys. I'm going to sign off because it is now 1:30. Thank you for the thanks. Hope you found it of value. I will be back again next week. I haven't decided on a topic yet, so feel free to message me or put in the chat any topics that you think you would like me to cover, and I will do my best to cover them in the half-hour kind of lunchtime slot. Thank you guys for joining me. See you guys next time.